All right, then we go to Isaiah 33, verse 2. Jehovah is his people's arm of salvation. As it says, be our arm from morning to morning, our salvation in troubled times. The prophet is calling the Lord his people's arm. He is an arm, and he's also our salvation. Be our arm from morning to morning, our salvation in troubled times. Because in those times of the end of the world, we were living from day to day, from morning to morning, wondering what the world is going to bring this time around, and anticipating more troubles ahead, of course. That's when they need the Lord's arm to intervene for them. The arm is a metaphor that's also a code name of the Lord himself and of his servant. Then we read in Isaiah 59:16, God's servant is his arm of righteousness. As it says in parallel here, his own arm brought about salvation for him. His righteousness rallied to his cause. The arm there is in parallel, in the synonymous parallel with righteousness. So there we see that righteousness is the other arm of God, the two arms of God that embrace his people, that intervene on behalf of his people, righteousness and salvation. The arm of righteousness brings about salvation because he's a forerunner of God's coming, of Jehovah's coming to reign upon the earth. And of course, Jehovah personifies salvation. It's like coming unto Christ means coming unto salvation. And the arm of the Lord prepares the way for the coming of the Lord among God's people of the house of Israel. In order to do that, he must be revealed to all nations, because all nations is where the remnants of the house of Israel are scattered. They've been scattered abroad among all nations. Then we move on to Isaiah 41:2, and we see that this righteousness is the person very clearly here. Who has raised up righteousness from the east? Of course, from the east is where the angel of the east comes from in the book of Revelation, and it turns out from a process of deduction that he is the same person as the angel from the east, calling him to the place of his foot. So when we put all these scriptures together, we see that this angel from the east, or this person called righteousness who comes from the east, comes to the promised land, the Lord's foot. And of course, the promised land is in relation to Palestine. So that would be, the east in relation to Palestine would be possibly the land of America. That is exactly where the rabbis say that their David, their Messiah, their latter-day servant of God is coming from. Calling him to the place of his foot, who has delivered nations to him, toppled their rulers, rendering him as dust to his sword, as driven stubble to his bow. So this person, righteousness, has amazing power given to him over other nations, over rulers and nations. Now, how did he get this power, and when did he get this power? We have to ask those questions, because we know from Isaiah's patterns that no one receives God's power unless he first passes some severe test of loyalty to God. Everybody who ascends to a higher spiritual level and is thus empowered has to go through a descent phase of trials and tribulations and be tested every which way to see if he will remain loyal to God. And then, like Nephi, the son of Helaman, when the Lord knows he's been loyal under every situation, then the Lord empowers him with power over the elements and so forth. And as Nephi, the son of Helaman, was translated, we get the idea that this person will also be translated. That is what I call an ascent phase. The person is reborn. He goes through ruin and humiliation and his descent phase of trials and tribulations, and he's reborn to a higher spiritual level, and that is an ascent phase where he ascends to the next highest spiritual level. And that is how he gets power over his enemies, and we know that from the theology of Isaiah, the general theology. Next we go to God gives his servant power over Babylon, Isaiah 48:14 through 15. Now this is the chapter, one of the chapters that Nephi quotes in 1 Nephi 20, where he starts quoting Isaiah basically to say what he could not say himself. And I'm just quoting a couple of passages from it because we don't have room in our podcast to continue a lot further with this. All of you assemble and hear, who among you foretold these things? It is him Jehovah loves. So this person who Jehovah loves is a prophet. He foretells things. He foretells things and they come to pass. Unlike other prophets who either don't foretell anything or they foretell things that don't come to pass. He says, it is him Jehovah loves. Of course, we know that John the Beloved was called that, and also the three Nephites were called beloved disciples. So there's a clue telling us that maybe this person is also translated at that point in time when he's empowered, like John was and like the three Nephites were. He says, he shall perform his will in Babylon, his arm shall be against the Chaldeans. So the arm of the Lord will be against the Chaldeans, which are simply the citizens of Babylon. Babylonians, or people from a metaphorical point of view, are now subscribing to Babylon's ideology, unlike the people of Zion who subscribe to Zion's ideology, which are quite opposed to one another. He says, I myself, the Lord says, have spoken it and also called him. I have brought him and I will prosper his way. It tells you that the Lord has decreed that this person should come. And of course, he meets terrible opposition, as we know from other scriptures in Isaiah and the Book of Mormon. So the Lord is saying, he's kind of preempting that idea and saying, hey, I've spoken it. Whatever you say is not going to work. I'm the one who's called him. I'm going to be prospering his way. And so if you're going to oppose him, then you're on the wrong side of the divide. Here in Isaiah 51, 9 through 11, we get a better view of how God empowers his arm to lead a new exodus. And of course, the whole arm scenario has to do with Israel's restoration, Israel's end-time restoration, the restoration of the Jews, the 10 lost tribes, and the Lamanites of today, to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and to the fulfilling of his covenants among them, with all its attendant blessings.